John Huddy, thank you. And a short time ago, I spoke with Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul. He just returned from a trip to Asia that included a stop in Taiwan. Mr. Chairman, nice to talk to you again, sir, and welcome back from your trip to Taiwan.
No, thanks for having me, Greta.
What did you learn in Taiwan?
We learned a lot of things. The purpose of the trip was to get briefed by Indo-PACOM, go into Japan, South Korea, then Taiwan, to know who the partners of Taiwan are, what the strengths and weaknesses are, what deterrents does Taiwan have against potential invasion from Communist China. You know, they're not fully prepared, Greta. They don't have the weapon systems that I've signed off on. There is some joint training, but I think there's a lot of work to be done to provide deterrence for peace. You know, as Reagan talked about peace through strength, we have to project power and strength in the region to deter Chairman Xi from his quote-unquote reunification of China.
Well, it seems to me that China, while you were traveling and checking to see whether or not Taiwan is ready in the event Communist China does invade Taiwan, is that President Xi was entertaining President Macron of France, and it seems that President Macron of France made very plain that he's staying out of it, which I don't know if he even had to say anything, but it certainly shows that France is not going to be helpful should the awful thing happen that Communist China invades Taiwan.
It was very unhelpful to our trip as well, because Macron's visit to Chairman Xi demonstrated, I think, weakness on his part, undermining the interests of the United States. You know, this is why, you know, the United States has to lead. And, you know, I've been a critic of this administration not leading, because when we don't lead, China will fill that vacuum. And Macron handed it to Chairman Xi on a silver platter. And I thought it was interesting that the minute Macron left Beijing is when we saw the buildup of military forces around the island of Taiwan. 11 battleships, 1 an aircraft carrier, and then 70 fighter jets to exercise drills in the Taiwan Straits.
Well, it wasn't even just the fact that France says, or Macron says, he's not going to get involved in Taiwan. He also said, and I thought this was quite clever but disturbing of President Xi, is that they're trying to move away from having the dollar as the international reserve. And by pushing the dollar out of its position, weaponizing that, is that it undermines the U.S.'s ability to impose sanctions that have any teeth. And I thought that was quite stunning and be a big change in 70 or 80 years.
That's exactly right. And what Chairman Xi has successfully done, I would argue, with this Belt and Road, is impose the digital yuan as the global currency. And we've seen this, whether it be in Africa or Latin America. But to have the French, you know, president say this, and then throw the United States under the bus, that, you know, we're not taking orders from the United States, and somehow they're going to go to China for the global currency, I just think absolutely, you know, it's just mind-blowing from a foreign policy standpoint. And that's why, you know, if we don't lead the United States on the world stage, others will fill it, and I'm afraid that's what's happening.
Well, it's hard to lead if one of your best allies, and France has been an ally for us for a number of decades. I mean, you know, many of our parents, you know, remember that Paris was liberated by the Americans. But France is the EU country with a nuclear weapon, and Ukraine and Russia are virtually next door. And he's going off to China and saying that he doesn't, you know, basically doesn't want to kowtow to the United States. He doesn't seem like a very good friend at a time when we're trying to help his continent.
It was very damaging from a foreign policy standpoint to see him kowtow to Chairman Xi, who, by the way, is Putin's closest ally. And he, you know, France, our oldest ally, but now a NATO ally, to cozy up to Chairman Xi, who is really in this fight in Ukraine with Putin and has his own sights on the Pacific region, as if China can now be this peace broker, if you will, like they demonstrate in the Middle East. And I worry about that as well, because we're nowhere to be found there as well. I think this is hugely damaging. It does demonstrate not only Macron's political weakness back home, which is why I think he did this, but also President Biden's weakness to allow something like this to happen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining me, sir.
Thanks as always, Greta. Good to see you.